Okay, let me know when you're ready.
Three, two, one. Button! That means I
So,
started recording.
so that was a massive bang on your end. I want to edit that out. Shall I start again or?
Now I can just edit.
Okay. Hello everyone and welcome to the newest edition of Blitzkreig. This is Remnants from 40K Theories.
And this is Fiaura from Fiaura.
And today we're going to be looking at vehicles of the Eldar. Which is going to be absolutely fun, isn't it, Fiora?
Can I explain to Eldar engineers basic concepts of armor protection, or are they going to just look at me all snooty like and go, "You know nothing," and then their tank explodes and I go, "Are you sure?"
Quite possibly. So let's start our list with the base tank of the Eldar forces, which is the Falcon Grav tank. Now, the Falcon Grav tank is extremely fast. It can achieve speeds of 800 kilometers an hour and can soar to altitudes much higher than the equivalent Imperial aircraft, giving it a limited flight capability. The weapon systems are quite adaptable. They can be tailored to any situation. They can be armed with standard pulse lasers, scatter lasers, shuriken cannons, bright lancers, star cannons, missile launchers, and also contains twin-linked shuriken catapults underneath the pilot's cockpit. And it can also be upgraded with a hollow field, star engine, spirit stones, and vector engines. It also has transport capability, which surprisingly isn't actually that much. It can only carry 6 Eldar warriors, and that's only if they're the standard warriors such as Guardians or Aspect warriors. It's unable to carry anything like Wraithguard, for example.
So let's start with this. Dear Eldar, did you design a tank or an aircraft? Because a hybrid between makes little sense. If this thing is expected to fight on the ground as the mainstay of the Eldar's armored forces, I feel very, very sorry for its pilots in every way, shape, and form. For a start, you literally have open air intake vents on the front of it that basically say "shoot me." But let's keep moving. You have a visible cockpit, like this is an aircraft. Like literally, it literally looks like just a glass cockpit. The Eldar do understand that they're going to have anti-tank weapons fired at this thing, right?
I should hope so. There's not many of the Eldar left.
And lastly, there's this thing that we like to call, you put your ammunition breech inside of a vehicle for a reason. It's on the outside. Like literally, I can see the where the round would be charged and fired out of this thing. You don't do that. That because if someone was to say hit that with say a crack missile or a seeker missile or basically any kind of explosive, it would go boom. And you don't want it to go boom right next to the pilot's head. Now, I will say this. If their theory is speed is armor, they're really putting all of their eggs into that basket wholeheartedly. But then you have to remember that it's talking about transporting 6 Eldar. You have to basically come to a near standstill for those 6 Eldar to get out. I wouldn't want to be sitting still in this thing for any length of time, period. I think I would die from, being shot at. Why? I can see why the Eldar are dying off. You're sending your warriors out in death traps. I swear to you, an M4 Sherman had more armor than this.
Oh dear God. You think for one of the most intelligent races in the galaxy, they'd put a little bit more emphasis on heavy armor.
Yeah, it looks pretty. I'll give it that. But then again, I keep seeing it being painted in bright, shiny colors. So, if speed is armor, isn't camouflage is usually supposed to be somewhere, right? Right? No? Who came up with this battle plan? And then they use the same chassis for everything. Which
will lead us on to the next vehicle then, which will be the Fire Prison Tank. Now, the Fire Prison Tank is based on the Falcon chassis, but it's a dedicated anti-tank variant. So it has no ability to transport troops. It's armed with a prison cannon, which has twice the range of the pulse laser or the scatter laser. And it's powerful enough to punch through extremely thick armor or combine with other cannons for increased firepower. And it can also discharge a disperse beam capable of cutting down entire squads of infantry. And it also has quite sophisticated tracking arrays to be actually a threat to fast-moving aircraft as well.
Okay, I can somewhat respect this. Note the word some and what. The anti-tank capability, sure, I can give you a significant boost to the anti-tank capability, especially since you're basically firing the equivalent of an Eldar las cannon. What I cannot give you respect for is the fact that you put the literal charging chamber of the laser on the outside of the tank. It's a big, bright, glowy, shiny object too, apparently.
A massive crystal, yes.
So, combat, most theories about combat indicate that people shoot at flashes and really bright, glowy things. Because that's usually where your enemy is. If you're going to put the charging chamber for your laser containing about, a couple megawatts of potential electrical discharge on the outside of the tank, please tell me that you've reinforced it some way so that when that gets shot, it doesn't kill everybody inside. To me, that's literally an explosion or a massive temporary lightning storm waiting to happen. On top of this, it's an open window on top for the gunner as well as the driver.
So lucky she'll be able to take out both the pilot and the gunner, won't it?
I could absolutely see why the driver might need a window. I cannot see why the gunner needs a window. I can't justify it at all. That's why we have gunner sights.
You'd think also with the Eldar's sophisticated technology, they have some kind of camera system with an internal display holographic screen or something, so they can be completely enclosed and they can just see everything from a holographic screen or just a visual computer screen.
There's that.
Just where they can see.
I would think they might even have like a virtual reality interface where either the user's body movements or the user doesn't even move anymore and just controls it with their mind at that point. Because aren't the Eldar all a little bit psychic?
Yeah, they are.
Hello? This would be so much easier. I also see a distinct lack of what I would refer to as, or what the Eldar might refer to as, primitive defenses, like smoke grenades. They talk about a hollow field, but a hollow field is only useful if... How should I put this? Holograms are really effective until you run into bad weather. So if it's raining, a hologram isn't really useful because the light is continuously being interrupted by little droplets of water. So the main defensive system of this vehicle, the hollow field, can be defeated by rain.
Or splashes of blood from nearby enemies.
Yeah. Again, I can really see why the Eldar are dying out very quickly.
Yeah, because let's touch upon the fact that all these Eldar vehicles, they're constructed from wraithbone and psychically resonant plastics, which obviously are designed to be lightweight. Now, if we're generous and say that wraithbone, as an organic material, is as dense as heavily dense bone from a very large wild animal, like say a rhinoceros, for example, it would still be, again, not as viable a defense as potentially the same thickness of adamantium plasteel?
Let's put it this way. If we are as generous as logically possible, and let's say Wraithbone is as dense as the foot bones of a Brontosaurus.
So I just want to interrupt that Brontosaurus doesn't actually exist. It never did. It was a paleontological chimera, but that's just a pet peeve of mine. I'm sorry.
But let's assume that it is as dense as a massive sauropod.
Okay, yeah.
And the foot bones of that massive sauropod that are supposed to support tons of weight. It is still only as strong as 1.5 times regular steel. And if you want to go into the realm of sci-fi, and fine, you can, but it's still bone. And the biggest thing with bone is when bone breaks, there's two ways of fixing it. One, you repair it over time. Two, you replace it. And in this case, even if the Wraithbone regenerates, every single time this thing takes a hit, it's going to break and fracture and shatter. Whether you believe it or not, your bones on a daily basis experience about 100 different minor micro fractures just from you walking around. The bone of this thing getting hit with a crack missile is gonna frickin' splinter and fracture everywhere. No matter how thick it is. Over and over again. It is... So, in comparison to, say, Elim and Russ, which doesn't have very good armor design, but is made of very strong armor. The Leman Russ, at least when you hit the steel plates of it, does not fragment and fracture unless it's actually going to be penetrated. This, even if it bounces a shot from any weapon, kinetic penetrator, shaped charge, high explosive round, doesn't matter. You've damaged the armor. It's now not as effective. Every single time it takes a hit, even if from the smallest caliber weapon, it damages the armor.
Yeah.
And I don't see any extra material lying around that it can use to repair that organically. So you're either going to have to... It's a one-hit armor. If it's a super armor, it's a one-hit armor. Literally, first hit, absolute best armor you can get. Second hit, well, I hope you bought life insurance yesterday. That's what I have to say about the Wraithbone. People can go ballistic in the comments if they want. I don't really care. But that's the truth about bone, and bone is armor. Every time it gets hit, it weakens.
Yeah. Anything more to say about the fire prism before we move on?
About what?
The fire prism tank.
Yeah, that's all I've got to say about it. I feel really bad for Eldar pilots.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next vehicle, which is the Eldar Wave Serpent. Now, the Wave Serpent, again, is based upon the Falcon Grav chassis. It's the main troop transport of the Eldar, but surprisingly, it doesn't actually have that much of an increase in troop transport capability. It can only transport about 10 passengers. And again, that's not really including things like the Wraith Guard, I don't believe. It has the ability to produce a powerful energy field across its bow, which actually absorb and dissipate enemy shots. It's strong enough to deflect shrapnel from artillery blasts and render small arms fire, including Space Marine bolter fire, ineffectual. And when flying in the type formation, multiple Wave Serpents can combine their fields together to not only create a reinforced energy barrier, but also turn it into an offensive weapon, creating a tsunami-like wave of energy, which, while it's rarely lethal, can disorient and sometimes inflict paralysis on living creatures or overload delicate circuitry. Now, this thing has an estimated top speed of 800 kilometers an hour, and it has a weight of 10 tons, and the armor is only at max 15 millimeters, while it's armed with either twin-linked Bright Lancers or twin-linked shuriken catapults.
Okay. So 10 to 15 millimeters of armor. Are you sure about that? Because that sounds terrible.
That's what it says in the official tech specs.
This thing is literally relying on its energy field for protection. As soon as the shield goes down, it's dead. The turning your shields into an offensive weapon, I like that idea. And being able to go 800 kilometers an hour while doing it, I like that idea. The problem I have with this idea is the words, while rarely lethal. That means it's not a very good offensive weapon.
No, but at the same time, if you're traveling at 800 kilometers an hour, then you unleash that wave of energy. The kinetic force would be enough to, effectively, knock the enemy off balance just enough, just so you can swoop it in and finish him off potentially, couldn't it?
I think that's the idea, but here's the problem: if you're going that fast, you do have to decelerate, and I'm pretty sure that you don't want to proceed to be part of the windshield in the process of deceleration, so that you can drop off your troops. So you would have to come in, I guess, two waves. One wave would be the shield wave, and the second wave would be the people actually being dropped off to assault. The biggest issue I have here is 10 to 15 millimeters of armor is supposed to stop, according to this, a Space Marine bolter. Bullshit?
In fairness, it's actually the energy shield that dissipates the smaller armor's fire. It's not the actual armor itself.
Okay. So as soon as, again, the energy shield comes down, 10 to 15 millimeters of armor isn't going to even stop a Space Marine bolter, because a Space Marine bolter is effectively a 30 millimeter grenade. That penetrates U.S. that'll almost penetrate an up-armored Humvee, and an up-armored Humvee has 80 millimeters of armor. Yeah, no. I don't know what to tell you. You're relying on speed and this energy shield, which I have no real specs for or ideas about what it's capable of. I don't have a electrical wattage to give me a reference point for about how strong it could be. So I'm guessing that it fluctuates, and it might be random, and it might have random amounts of strength, which, while nice, means that there are going to be times where it's not going to be as strong, and an enemy tank is going to fire one shot and hit it. And also, its combat speed is only 80 kilometers an hour, which means that I'm assuming when it's going faster than that, it is not truly actually capable of engaging the enemy. So its turret would obviously lose tracking at over 80 kilometers an hour. And the pilot, being that there's one person crewing this vehicle, is going to have a real hard time aiming and shooting at the same time. I don't care who you are. I don't care how many ways you can get your brain to work. Trying to get a turret to point in one direction while you drive in another direction is really freaking hard without running into a rock or just flat out missing your target repeatedly. So the pilot likely has to focus on one task or the other at a time.
Should we be generous and say, because the Eldar are looking at this now supposedly so technologically advanced, that the pilot is only just concentrating on the driving, and that the actual tank has some kind of automated AI controlling the turret?
We could be generous and say that. We could be generous and say that the turret is either AI controlled or has some psychic link, since it talks about a psychic link to the pilot, has some sort of psychic link to know how to aim and operate effectively. Because while I could say it could just be programmed to shoot anything that wasn't Eldar, you have to remember the Eldar fight Dark Eldar. That wouldn't work. I would also, or we could say that it's an AI targeting, and the Eldar's armor has a RFID beacon that says friend or foe. That would be nice. The
I would assume the
problem,
Eldar would have something akin to that, at least.
the problem I would have with that is if someone could dial into the frequency of that ID beacon, everyone knows where you are. So I'm literally looking over at what are they called? Tech Marines or Tau Earthcast and going, did you hijack the Eldar's computer system yet? Because if you did, we're all gonna laugh.
Let's see who could potentially hijack. So you got Tech Marines, you got pretty much the entire Adeptus Mechanicus who could do it. You got the Tower Earthcast. Hell, even Orc Mech Boy could probably take a shot at this. And if
Orc
you get
Mecha
hijacked
Boy
by,
especially, because all orcs are at least psychically connected.
and all with Mech Boys, all knowledge of technology is literally coded into their DNA. They know it on an instinctual level what to do.
Yeah.
They're not trained. They know. They just know.
So if the Orc Mech Boy suddenly got this frequency and went, I think that's Eldar, all the orcs would know where the Eldar are.
Or as the orcs like to call them, pansies. And that's actually canon. They call them pansies. They call Space Marines beakies, and they call squats stunties.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't... I wish I could give this thing some sort of credit where it's due, but open vents, I don't care what your sloping on your armor is, that screams shoot me. Fully exposed forward flight wings, that a hit to those is going to screw up any form of mobility you have and knock it off delicate balance. A cockpit that everyone can see from a mile away, and the gunner's position up top also has cockpit glass. And if you're going to rely on an energy shield, okay, that's fine. But then some of these vehicles are relying on a hollow field for their defenses. And again, rain just screws up holograms right, left, and sideways.
Funnily enough, the Wave Serpent actually can't be upgraded with the hollow field. It can only take the Star Engines, Spirit Stones, and Vectored Engines, from what I can see.
Wait. You're really putting all your eggs into one basket, because some of these vehicles can't have the shield that this thing does, and others can't, and this one can't have the hollow field the other ones do.
And I also want to make a correction earlier. I mentioned earlier how it can only carry 10 and can't carry Wraithguard. I'm incorrect. It can carry up to 5 Wraithguard. I just want to admit my mistake there. But you'd think something that's more of a dedicated troop transport will have more capability than just carrying up 4 extra people. You'd think it would carry at least double that.
It carries 12. That's a squad.
Yeah, but even so, you'd think it would be more akin to something like, I don't know, for something that's purely a dedicated troop transport, that's not even a hybrid like the Falcon. You'd think it would carry at least up to 15, which could be up to, like, could be like, 2 small squads, a couple of warlocks, that kind of thing. You would think.
Get a full squad, 1 heavy weapon, and a commander. That would be ideal, but nope.
No.
Not to mention the extreme limitation of ammunition.
Yes, because it says it has an estimated 4,000 shots from the main power pack.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the weapons it's equipped with are basically Eldar machine guns.
Correct.
4,000 rounds of ammunition for a hull-mounted machine gun is pathetic.
That'll last you about, 10 minutes, if you're lucky?
Maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Our M2 Bradleys, with their 30mm autocannons, carry in excess of 10,000 rounds of ammo. A 50 cal, a single box of 50 cal ammo is 1,000 rounds. And Abrams carries like 12 boxes of ammo just for the machine gun.
It's really not looking good for the Eldar so far, is it? We're at 3 for 3 for shit, essentially.
3 for 3 for shit-stained diarrhea bad. Oh my god, what did you do? Who designed these? Who did it? Who is the terrible, awful human being who put these together? Or better yet, who's the terrible alien who came up with this?
Meanwhile, somewhere in the warp, Zine just sitting there rubbing his hands going, just as planned.
Just as planned, all of the Eldar will put all of their faith in their vehicles and implode. And then I get to munch on souls. Or Slaanesh does. Which one of us does that again?
Slaanesh eats the souls. Except for the Harlequins, they belong to Chigorak.
And now we move into the Void Spinner, the super heavy tank.
Yes. One of the, what's known as an engine of Vol, which is, fancy name of saying, super heavy tank. It was pretty much unique to the one craft world of the Eldar, the craft world of Biel-Tan, which is a more warrior-centric craft world amongst the Eldar. Now, the thing is, this vehicle is considered by the other Eldar an abomination and considered to be extremely dangerous. The main weapon is the Void Spinner Array, which is a massive monofilament cannon that launches clouds of monofilament wire. But this wire is also laced with a barrage of bacteria and wraithbone parasites, which is to basically not only kill their types by the constricting and slicing threads of wire, but also broken down at a molecular level, with everything from flesh and bones to rock and metal being affected. It's pretty much the first instance of a dirty weapon we've actually encountered on this show, I believe.
Not only is it the first instance of a dirty weapon we've encountered, if you're going to use a dirty weapon, the design they have implemented for this is absolutely the worst idea ever. So, let's talk about ventilation. You want to put intake vents with a biological weapon on the front of the biological weapon in the direction at which the biological weapon will be fired.
Meanwhile, someone in the depth of mechanics is just going, what the fuck are you doing?
I'm sorry, what? No, you don't put massive vents anywhere near biological weapons. As a matter of fact, the Russians actually decided that if they ever deployed biological weapons, all of their Scud missile launchers came with covers to cover up the vents on the engines for air intake, so that they wouldn't have any risk of sucking it in and then infecting somebody later. This is a terrible idea, and if this is able to eat through anything, that includes you. And I'm pretty sure it's not going to discriminate. Because remember, they have to be able to fight other Eldar and Dark Eldar, who are also going to use the same material that you're made out of. Why would it discriminate against what you're made out of?
Maybe that's the reason why the other Eldar hate it so much, because they're just thinking, that's a stupid idea. You're an idiot. So my Eldrad Ulthran is sitting there on Ulthwig going, is Biel-Tan being stupid again? Oh, for fuck's sake.
Now, let's talk about monofilament wire. Monofilament wire only works based upon tension in the wire itself. That means it requires anchor points. Flying through the air is not an anchor point. I don't care if it can cut through just about anything. If you don't have something physically holding it to anchor it in place, that cut is useless. Now, if it gets wrapped around and gets into machinery and stuff, or it gets wrapped around somebody's arm, sure. But while it's just flying through the air, it's completely useless. Considering it's laced with a biological weapon, Eldar, you are some dirty sons of bitches that should be exterminated. I'm sorry, no, you don't use biological weapons if you want anyone to like you ever again. This is... Not only do they put vents on the front, they doubled the number of them for the same number of engines. Still only has 2 engines on the back, but it has 4 air intake vents. And the turret has an air intake right next to the ammunition loading point, which again is completely exposed. I could literally imagine that once any form of shields are down, a rocket hits one of those ammunition loading points, and every single Eldar around it suddenly screams in pain and agony as they're eaten alive by their own biological weapon.
Does this mean we're 0 for 4 so far?
I would almost go we're -1 for 4 just because they're actually willing to use a biological weapon, but that's beside the point. This still has the cockpits everybody can see for miles. The forward wings have been extended even further to provide flight. I'm just waiting for one of those to get hit. And then it even has side wings to provide additional stabilization. Again, razor thin. It looks like an aircraft, not a tank. Did somebody tell the Eldar that tanks are supposed to look like tanks? Or, act like tanks? It's pretty. I'll give it that. It's pretty.
You have to admit, when it comes to aesthetics, the Eldar get 10 out of 10 for aesthetics.
Yes, they do.
0 for everything else, it seems. But they can make it look pretty. They can make it look like... Are they at least aerodynamic? Can we give them even that?
I would say yes and no.
So somewhat aerodynamic.
The bulges on the way the cockpits are bulged out defeats a lot of aerodynamic effort. And also the location of the air intake vents destroys aerodynamic effort. You want air intake vents underneath the aircraft, not above it. You basically, because of the way lift works, if you reduce the amount of air underneath the wing, you increase the lift. If you reduce the air above the wing, you create downforce. They've created downforce. Which might be what they want. They might actually need to have downforce to keep it down on the ground. Fair enough. But yeah.
Okay, so we'll move away from tanks for a split second. We're going to go into the War Walker. Now, the War Walker is an Eldar bipedal vehicle used as light reconnaissance and as a weapons platform. The Imperial counterpart would actually be the Imperial Guard Sentinel, but it actually has superior agility and firepower. Now, it stands about 3 meters tall, and it's actually the smallest and lightest of all the walking machines of the Eldar. It's armed with a pair of heavy weapons, either bright lancers, scatter lasers, shuriken cannons, star cannons, or missile launchers. So it has versatility to adapt to multiple battlefield roles. The pilot is actually protected by an array of force fields due to the lack of armour, which can not only protect against enemy fire, but blur and distort the machine's outline and location. And these are generally deployed in squads of up to 3 vehicles.
Now, depending upon their tactics, if they're deploying squads of 3, I hope they're deploying squads of 3 with every one of them having a different weapon system. The design of the legs is actually one of the most solid designs they could have come up with. The reverse chicken walk leg means that when it puts its foot down, if there's a rock or something behind it, it can just collapse backwards and put more weight onto the base of onto more sections of the leg to support itself. So if it missteps, it's not going to fall. However, dear pilot, did you want protection? I wasn't aware of this. Instead of actually putting armor where they, like the Imperial Guard did with the Sentinel, they just put a piece of glass that covers most of the pilot's body and then have open cockpit sides. That's one very dead pilot.
As stated, it is protected by energy fields and distortion fields that blur the outline of the actual machine itself.
That's good.
So it's working more on the basis of, if you can't get a focus on me, you can't hit me.
Yes, it is. It's working more on the focus of, please don't let my shields fail. Please don't let them get a focus on me. Oh, there's 60 people shooting at me. One of them's going to hit me.
So it had a promising start, at least with the leg design. They got something right.
they got something right with the leg design. They got something right with where the weapons are located, as far away from the crew compartment as possible, since they're going to expose everything about the weapon. The air intake vents for the engine are very, very well concealed and hidden, but still provide enough cover space to get air inside so they can have air for the engine. But yeah, the biggest drawback here is the pilot is literally sitting in the open. And while you can go, yes, we're using distortion fields and holographic, and I'm like, that's cute and all, but that assumes your enemy is competent and shoots straight. What if 30 orcs just walk up with shooters and spray at and spray in the general direction of the cockpit?
You shoot enough times, you're bound to hit something.
Fling enough DACA in the general direction, you'll hit what you're aiming at. And I'm sorry, he's very dead. In most cases, I would assume he's just very, very dead. And there's not a lot you can do about it.
The sad thing is, as well, that out of all the vehicles we've covered so far, this is actually the most viable one.
Am I allowed to die a little bit on the inside with that?
The vehicle where the pilot is completely exposed is the most viable vehicle. Engineers everywhere, please, a moment of silence for all logic and purpose. And in that silence, we'll move back to tanks. We'll move back to another heavy tank of the Eldar.
Before you get started.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
We'll move back to heavy tanks in part 2.
Ah, yes. See you then.
Please vote for the next race you would like to see, and go check out Warhammer 40K's Theories channel to see part 2 of this one. Moving on.
Okay.